We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
10, 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, it's great to be back. Life has been crazy lately, and I want to do, tonight's show is going to be long because there's so much stuff to talk about, and I'm wearing my Megadeth shirt in honor of Dave Mustaine's birthday. Happy birthday, Dave Mustaine, the guy who can't get over being kicked out of Metallica. I just had this conversation the other day with someone, and I'm getting way off politics here, but about how every Megadeth album is a response to a Metallica album, and it just kind of blew my mind. This guy kind of pointed it out, and I just went, holy crap, you're right. I can't even believe this. But anyway, happy birthday, Dave Mustaine. Big part of my childhood, Megadeth. I love metal. You know that. So anyway, the first thing I want to do is show you this video I put together because I just recently had this flash of inspiration, and I was just thinking, wow, the news is so terrible. I happened to tune in. Well, not tune in, but I happened to just kind of give a look to what CNN and MSNBC and all those guys are doing. And I just want you to see this. I posted it on Twitter and TikTok, but check this out.
Aren't they cute? Look at the things that we can do. This is definitely not a sales cycle that we are trying to run for our advertisers in the weapons industry. We just really, really want to help Ukraine. And the U.S. definitely has nothing to do with any of the provocation for this. We love war so much. Look at all these cute bullets. Aren't these bullets amazing? That guy has a helmet, isn't he? Oh, he reminds me of my husband. Here's some more bullets in the forest. Look,
yes, and these bullets are great.
Well, so Congress, they need more money for more war. Let's watch this.
Hey, I'm old and I want you to give some money to war because war is good and it's World War II and we're like Winston Churchill and everyone else is Hitler. I think I just had a stroke. Oh no. Well, give me some money for war. We love war, yes, war, more, yes, that's what we want. I think I'm drooling.
Well, that's that guy. He's old and he wants more war, and so do we. We have some commercial obligations to vote.
Here's Fox News. Search results on YouTube. Now, I wanted to say the end. I put this on TikTok, and this guy who was absolutely accurate came to me and said, "Yo, Fox was doing the same stuff until a couple weeks ago when they realized, it was impeach Biden time or whatever." And I agree. Fox is no better. I'm not kind of holding them up as an example. One thing I will say that I think is true is you get more accurate news out of the competitive media, right? So I guess to clarify that, what I mean is that when the Democrats are in charge, the Republican conservative media is much more adversarial. So they're much better at kind of documenting the corruption, and vice versa. I mean, when Trump was president, the media never shut up about him. The mainstream press, like the New York Times and the Washington Post and all that stuff. Now that Biden's president, you have the conservative media, the fringe right or the Alex Jones or whatever, the libertarian press, the people that are the most adversarial to the Democrats give the best news because news should be adversarial, and they tend to have adversarial views as a starting point to the opposing party. So I feel like really you do get more accurate news. That said, I wasn't giving Fox News a pass, but I honestly went to YouTube to look for video of Fox News caping for the Ukraine war so I could put pig noises and jokes over that too. And I couldn't find it right off the bat. So I went, oh, wow, I'm just going to show that, Fox was actually kind of being adversarial like journalists should be about the war. So that was my starting point today, because I spent a little creative time working on something to share with y'all today. But I also wanted to go through this, I guess what I would call a little bit of a war update. And we'll do it with Twitter and others outside the mainstream sources, because that's the best way to really show what's actually happening. So this is an account that I follow, that I like a lot, and it's a guy here. Let me switch this up a little bit. I don't know if I like that view. That's better. So this guy's called Cherub. How do I pronounce it? Chebareki Man or whatever. Anyway, the neocon project to topple Putin and neutralize Russia has backfired terribly. The plan began with engineering the Kiev coup and installing an obedient government the neocons could control. They then armed Ukraine to the teeth and just let nationalists do what comes to nationalists naturally, which is persecute and slaughter disobedient minorities. So the reason I'm reading this guy's stuff, this guy's actually like of Ukrainian descent, I believe, or Russian. So he has a pretty good handle on the actual politics of the area. Anyway, soon after grabbing power, they began conducting provocations against ethnic Russian population in eastern Ukraine. That population wanted nothing to do with the nationalists running their country, so they broke away and declared independence. The Donetsk and Luhansk breakaway humiliated the nationalists terribly, so Kiev mounted a military campaign to suppress them. That didn't go well. Ultimately, in the better part of the decade, with aid from Russia, the separatists prevailed. Crimea fared much better thanks to the geography, holding a vote and reuniting with the Russian Federation in a whirlwind process. Then in late 2021, early 2022, the nationalists were gearing up for an operation to overthrow the separatist government, having amassed a force of 60,000 near the Donbass for the job. The nationalists didn't want the actual population and would have been fine with just killing everyone and or deporting them all, but rightfully it was ethnic Russian land and the residents were going to fight for it. So the people that are saying that Ukraine is like a new Israel, I think maybe have a decent point to make, in the sense that, it's obviously something that the US is arming. Anyway, I wanted to read this guy's. I'm not saying that I 100% endorse this. I'm not saying that this is 100% reality. I wanted to read to you an alternative view from a guy who literally is a former Ukrainian citizen, or a guy that I don't know his bona fides, so I can't really vouch for his credibility, but I will say he is obviously someone who knows the politics of the region very well. So I assume that he is from that area, and maybe it's not good to assume, but I've been following this guy for a while and he seems to have pretty realistic takes, and he says that he talks to people in the country and on the ground. So that's why I'm sharing this particular viewpoint with y'all. So the nationalists didn't want the actual rightfully Russian residents are going to. So Putin was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The Russian public that had been demanding the Kremlin do something about the plight of the Donbass people for many years. And if Putin had not come to their defense, his reputation would have suffered badly, and indeed was suffering. The pivotal event in this history was the Kiev coup, of which Nuland played the key role. The neocon plot all along had been to destabilize Russia, topple Putin, engineer a Moscow Maidan, and repeat what they did to Ukraine. Russia is a incredibly resource wealthy country, and the neocons have been lusting after it ever since the collapse of the USSR. The neocons knew poking the bear would eventually draw a response, and finally it worked. That was the signal to trigger the massive sanctions regime. regime, which neocons were absolutely certain would result in destabilization of Russia, the overthrow of Putin, and a death blow to the economy. What they didn't count on was Russia insulating itself from the effects of sanctions, a process that started in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. While the sanctions did give Russia some trouble, the pain was quickly dealt with, and Russia was able to rapidly shift markets. Probably nobody is surprised how well it went, more than Putin himself. Now 430,000 Ukraine corpses and counting are pushing up daisies and experiencing external dirt nap, and no single person in history has done more damage to Ukraine than neocon utensil Victoria Nuland. The neocons' lust to get Putin has resulted in the biggest crisis in Europe, a generation, and the destruction of a country. If there ever was a person who should rot behind bars and for the rest of her life, it's Miss Piggy. And so, I just got a notification on my phone, and I went, "Oh crap! YouTube shut my stream off." But I'm live on Rumble as well, so if they do shut me off, I am also broadcasting live to Rumble from now on. But I think that is an alternative view of the situation that, I think people can look at and go, that makes a lot of sense. It might not be completely true. The source may be sketchy at best, but from where I'm sitting, it's definitely a viewpoint to consider. Let's put it that way. And I'm being very careful with how I phrase this, because we live in the land of the free, and we have freedom of expression, and we're free to do that kind of thing without any consequences, right? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I wanted to show you that before I showed you this, which is a tweet from homeboy at the Gray Zone, Kit Clarenberg. Is the guy's name, I believe, right? So this is what Kit has, and it says, this statement is a blow, or that statement is a blow to Western countries that have spent the past year attempting to convince developing countries to condemn Moscow and support Ukraine. The times they are a change in. G20 statement drops reference to Russia aggression against Ukraine. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because the U.S. is out of touch. We are vastly, vastly out of touch. And I was trying to think of a good analogy for how to describe what we are right now, because we have to be self-aware how we look to the world, as this is going on. I mean, look at who our president is, like a corpse, a little puppet corpse. And I mean, just put yourself in like the shoes of someone who's not an American, like watching this circus going on. Like, our government is completely out of our hands. It's obviously run by these like power hungry neocons who just will dump infinite resources into these proxy wars and these regime change, experiments, while us, our own people are living in the streets and suffering, and we have these tragedies and these climate disasters all over the place. And, it's wild too, that just me reading Cherubicky Man's tweet that kind of sums up the situation from a different perspective would be called Russian propaganda, or, Putin propaganda, whatever you want to call it, disinformation. But the reality is, it's just another point of view of a very nuanced situation, a very detailed situation. And the fact that you can be shut down or called an enemy for even engaging with other points of view about a situation is very I don't want to say scary because it's not scary. It's annoying, really, is what it is. It's angering. Someone once said that depression is anger turned inward. So if something upsets me, I try not to internalize it. I try to bring the anger outward anger, not inward anger. We don't need to. We hurt ourselves enough as it is. So I wanted to start with that whole, first of all, the news pigs, and then the summation of Ukraine as it's seen through the eyes of a typical American versus Ukraine as it's seen through the eyes of the rest of the world. And it's clear now that we are, so there's a couple of different analogies I was trying to go with here. The first one was like, if you've ever worked for a startup company, there's always like that failed. There's like these guys for a minute that like get their loan or their capital, and then they like blow it all on like a nice Porsche that they can floss at the office with, or a like $20,000 watch they can show off at the office. And then when their company fails, you're just like, what a douchebag that guy was. Like, he could have spent that $20,000 on, something else. So that was the first analogy I came up with. And then I came up with the washed up actor analogy, because I think that encompasses it better, because it's like the US is completely, the people in our government right now are living on our former glory. In that news pig clip I did with Mitch McConnell, that I kind of touched on that whole thing where it's like, we still view ourselves through the lens of World War II. As if there isn't like a huge swath of data between World War II and now to look at as well, right? Like World War II was cool and all, like we were the heroes in that, but a lot has happened since World War II that we were not the heroes in, and we need to be self-aware and kind of acknowledge that. And I just don't see that really happening much. In now progressive circles, now it's my heroes, Dead Kennedys and Ministry and these bands that were like anti-war under Bush are now like, yeah, go Ukraine, let's give them lots of weapons to get Putin. Putin's so terrible. And the reality is, what's really wild about it is the Republicans on one side will call the left communists, and the left is like, you're a Putin guy if you criticize the Ukraine war. And they think a lot of people still think Russia is a communist country, and it hasn't been communist since the fall of the Soviet Union. It had an Apple store, it's a capitalist country. And so it's just the level of like cognitive dissonance that people have around this issue, specifically on the left, is breathtaking. Like, oh, get Putin, guys. Oh my God, it's frustrating. Especially after you were against the Iraq war and you saw the imperialistic tendencies of our country, and you could look at literally every war we've been involved with since World War II and go, what the hell did good came of any of that? And I mean, proxy war after proxy war. I was thinking about this the other day. Vietnam and Afghanistan were both proxy wars that we fought with the USSR. Ukraine is the third in the trilogy, the proxy war trilogy. Jesus fuck, people. What are we doing? It's just, anyway, I have a lot to cover tonight, so let's move on. So on that note of Ukraine and our stupid ass media and our people that are uncritical and unquestioning, so let me just intro this. I am in my 40s, so I'm not young, and I had some health problems, right? And thank you in the comments, my friends, for the kind words. I appreciate you. I appreciate anyone that tunes into this shit, because I do it because I need to get this shit out of my system more than anything. But also, I do want to share these little nuggets that I find, and connect them for y'all. And I'm very thankful that anyone tunes in at all. So thank you for the feedback, and I appreciate y'all for watching. If you're out there, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it later, I don't give a fuck. I fucking appreciate you. And now I lost my place. But no, so what I was talking about here was censorship. So I'm an old guy. I watch a lot of YouTube, and this doctor who I watch on YouTube literally changed my life. And I challenge you to go watch a lot of his videos. His name's Dr. Eric Berg. And for me, a lot of it started with sexual health because, you know, when you get to my age, you have some problems like, no, the dick's not working quite as well as you want it to. And, you know, guys my age can, you have, especially with the way the American diet is. And so that's where my health journey started. And then I realized, holy shit, my diet is terrible. I'm pre-diabetic. I'm eating terrible food. Our entire food system is poison. It's a deadly treadmill of poisonous food and poisonous pharmaceuticals that they're putting us all on. Blah, da, 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 da. Dr. Berg, this guy is, and I'm going to share this clip of him, but he is a guy who I just adore. I literally, this guy saved my life. And the reason he's so great is he'll go, so I'll give you a real example. I'm gonna probably go into too much detail here, but I had some like face dandruff, basically. It's called seborrheic dermatitis. And I found out that it's all related to diet. Like a lot of it's related to seed oils. If you eat a lot of foods with like, you know, canola oils and sunflower oils and that kind of stuff, it's really bad for your skin, and it can cause these irritations that inflame your skin. And, you know, it's a lot of other factors as well. You got to clean your face, that kind of stuff. But just watching Dr. Berg, he goes at the problem, and rather than go, oh, get this pill, he goes, hey, if you have problem X, here's the behaviors that are causing problem X that you need to address. Rather than telling you to take a bunch of drugs or do a bunch of bullshit, he points you to the source of your problem and goes, if you're having, you know, problems with like insomnia and anxiety, you're probably not getting enough exercise. You know, you need to get out there, and like even just walk will help you get better rest. Like just that kind of stuff that people need to hear. But in America, doctors are subsidized by big pharma and health. And so they're not going to tell people these simple solutions or how to address the problem because there's money in treating the symptoms, you know? So anyway, Dr. Berg got censored as fuck. And I will just actually play this video for y'all because it's a 12-minute video. Maybe I should speed it up a little bit. I love this guy though. And no, I'm not even gonna speed it up. I'm not just going to play sections of it. I probably won't play the whole thing. And now I'm just yapping. So here we go. Let me share this with y'all. So this is Dr. Berg talking about his recent battle with censorship.
Well, it's official. YouTube has just now banned anything related to health that doesn't align with the general medical consensus. So if any information related to health doesn't agree with the World Health Organization, they won't necessarily always take down the video, but they're going to change the algorithms. So they're going to replace those videos that were popular, that had lots of likes and lots of engagement, with medical information. This new partnership with YouTube is supposed to protect you against misinformation and promote high quality health information. And their definition of misinformation is anything that opposes their viewpoint. I mean, if you go to drberg.com, you will.
Okay, he goes into detail here, and he even shows like just so the reason I'm even bringing this up is because this is a guy who's not even political, right? This whole thing, what he's doing here is unrelated to politics completely. He's just trying to help people, and they're censoring him for what? For profit. You know, it's hard to look at anything anymore without looking at it through that lens.
See that I have 7,607 success stories. I'm helping people. I'm giving people lots of non-toxic solutions. And if you just read the comments, you'll see that a lot of people are being helped. So my information is not dangerous. It's not misinformation. It's actually quite helpful. And this new change is going to hurt a lot of people because they're not going to be able to find alternative viewpoints, alternative opinions. Sometimes medicine doesn't work. You know, looking for inexpensive natural remedies to handle certain body issues.
And that is a problem, folks. low cost natural remedies are a problem in America. Keep that in mind.
Guess what? Now they're going to have a very difficult time finding those solutions because all these medical sites are going to replace alternative health. I mean, I used to rank for so many conditions. Now you can't even find me unless you type Dr. Berg / whatever. And even on the keto diet, I have 928 keto videos. That's right, 928 videos. Guess what? When you type keto diet, you can't find me. Instead, the number one ranked video is from Mayo Clinic. Okay. And the comments are turned off. And you can see the likes are actually not very high compared to the number of views. I think they have like 260,000 views, but very few likes. And it's an
So the reason I'm showing you this is my doctor got red pilled. Okay. My favorite YouTube doctor got red pilled because they're jacking him. They're doing the same thing to him that they're doing to leftist YouTube. And we told everyone that this is what's going to happen when the COVID shit got out of hand. Like, hey, hold on a minute with your misinformation shit. Like, this is getting just a little bit creepy that you guys are pushing so hard for. And this is the end result. And listen to what he says. He's talking about now, and he's going to show you this fucking clip. The keto diet is actually a really valuable diet. And I know several people who have had success with the keto diet. And this guy is an advocate for it. And he's being deranked because it's a diet that's helping people. And watch what they put in the top ranking spot that he'll show you. This is a better shot for you.
Anti-keto video. And I'm going to share some interesting things in that video. But I first want to communicate a couple things. You know, a long time ago when Google started, they had this motto, and that was do the right thing.
Do no evil. No, they said do no evil.
It to
don't be evil.
Don't be evil.
Oh, that's right. No,
and
right.
Now I don't even know if they have a motto. But you think just giving people this
Dr. Berg gets red pilled, my God.
Monopoly.
Okay, where's
people go on the internet?
Okay, you got to see.
It's an inability.
You got to see the video real quick because I don't want to play the whole thing. Okay, so this is the video that they put in the place. Watch this.
And ketoacidosis. But mild ketosis or therapeutic ketosis is extremely therapeutic. And I'm going to put some links on a whole bunch of science behind that supports that.
When I think about ketosis, sometimes I get a little nervous. I think, well, gosh, we don't really actually want you in ketosis, but can you tell us about that?
Right. And I think this is something that is the unknown with when people are saying, well, I'm going to put myself on a ketogenic diet and be in ketosis, because really when you think about what ketosis is, it's a alternative pathway that our body has to use in times of emergency.
So right there, you could see that a huge bias. They don't want people to do keto. They think ketosis only occurs in an emergency situation when you are starving or something like that. That is so false. Talk about misinformation on steroids. That is absolutely not true. Did you realize that when your body goes into this mild ketosis, your fight or fight mechanism goes down?
He goes through this whole video and debunks it.
Us in terms of we don't necessarily want people to be in ketosis.
I'll put a link in the description or whatever, but I don't want to. What this made me think about more than anything is a Bill Hicks bit where he talks about the USA being the United States of advertising, because that's what this is about. Even with Google, that's a company that subsists on advertising money. And I guarantee you, pharma and health, and we know this from COVID, that pharma and health insurance companies and just big health in general has their hands. They have the money to buy the media. It's well documented. And so their hands are in everything. They're control. So when something like keto diet comes out and people are searching for that, they can now control what's in the search results for that and scare people about it. So they keep buying drugs. And that is the country we live in. Everything is about someone making money, even if it's a problem or something that, look at the pharmaceuticals industry and the OxyContin, the opiates. It's just, I mean, on one hand, I think it's terrible what's happening. On the other hand, I'm glad that a mind like Dr. Berg, who's kind of like a middle of the road normal guy, is affected by this now, because I think people are starting to wake up to the reality that, hey, this is not okay. Like the information that this guy, the way that I found this guy was through organic search. I found him for searching for symptoms that I had, and I found one of his videos and I went, wow, I'm going to try that. And I tried it and it worked. And, the guy has videos that I've on remedies that I've tried that didn't work as effectively as I thought. But the reality that these types of people need to be censored, or the way Google used to work is by, they elevated, first of all, the people that, work closely and within the rules of their search engine, but also what people reacted to. So if you click through the articles that got the most clicks and the most time on page, where people actually spent time reading or watching the content, that content was elevated because that was proof that, hey, this is engaging content that people are watching and consuming and really enjoying or getting some value out of. And now they're rewiring everything for power structures, and Jimmy Dore had a guy on today that was talking about how they're documenting what Google's doing. But I'm glad that, like I said, people like this are being affected by it now to some extent, because everyone needs to wake up to this shit. So anyway, the next thing I want to talk about is the Jimmy Dore Cornel West interview. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, because I think that Do Dissidents and all the other YouTubers, RBN, have really covered it well. But in fact, I'm going to show a clip from Niko House, because I think Niko sat down with Jimmy and really kind of like Jimmy. There was a couple nuggets near the end where Jimmy basically explained, he eloquently put into words what upset him about Cornel's performance. And we can talk about Peter Dow as well and that whole decision. But I think for now it's early, so I'm going to let the Peter Dow thing slide a little bit and just see how it plays out, because I do like a lot of what Peter Dow said. And I do realize that he was once a Clinton person. He was an interloper. And so I think people are rightfully militantly skeptic. And I think that's a good way of putting it. You have got to be militantly skeptic. And the way that CJ and Nick from RBN reacted to Peter Dow being like was absolutely warranted after the way that the Bernie campaign went down the last two cycles. A complete and total grift who took small dollar donations and rallied up a bunch of small dollar donations from people and then folded right into the fucking corporate Democratic Party. The whole point of Bernie Sanders and the Justice Democrats and the squad was to get people into those seats that had working class values and would actually shift the dynamic again back to the working class in the Democratic Party. And instead of that happening, they just give them all floaties and go, oh yeah, now you're one of us, so just shut up and let's do a war in Ukraine. Anyway, Jimmy's criticism of Cornel, I think, is warranted in that he's scaring away potential Trump voters by calling Trump a neo-fascist and acting like Trump is the worse of two evils, because he is clearly not. He's clearly not. Yes, Trump is not good. He's not great. Honestly, at this point, I keep saying that out of habit, but I the more that they indict him and make him a martyr, the more I'm like, you know what? Like, the establishment powers that be hate this guy so much, and I've said this 1,000 times, that I want to vote for him now. You assholes. You've made Trump appealing to a lot of people he would not have otherwise been appealing to. Maybe that's your goal. I don't know. But listen to some of this. So Jimmy kind of breaks down in this section. I won't play the whole thing again, but I think there's like a good 5 or 6 minutes here where Jimmy breaks down what I just kind of said and in a much more elegant way. So wait, here we go.
Yes. And then he claims he wasn't there. But anyway, wow. That's who Peter Dow is. Peter Dow, I'm sorry you didn't know that. But yeah, he brags about being trained by the IDF and being a part of that militia.
And I know that he's supposed, he's been on a better path apparently since 2017-ish. And like, I'm all about redemption. I actually firmly
See, I'm with Niko on that. It's early. Let's see. We have some time.
believe that people can like change paths. But like I said the other day, like that don't mean you got to put them in a leadership position.
That's
Like,
That's
true.
exactly right.
you know,
Hey, just to get back to the Tucker Carlson point.
yeah.
So when Tucker Carlson would invite me on his show, it would be so I could get my message out to half the country. Not that I can help amplify his message, but his message.
Really, that's not the truth, but that's how Jimmy thinks. And I think that's smart because when you get a platform like that, Jimmy would always be like, ah, da, 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 da. He does that on Joe Rogan. I think sometimes that's one of my criticisms of Jimmy. Sometimes he's like in overdrive, and I wish he would skip. Like I just watched him on the Boys podcast, and it was great. But like sometimes like, whoa, Jimmy, let's just reel it back just a little bit. But again, what the fuck do I know? Jimmy's way more successful than I am, so he's doing something right. But anyway, I'll shut up and get out.
Often coincided with mine, except like for Julian Assange, right? And he admitted camera.
Yeah.
He admitted on camera that he changed his mind about Julian Assange.
I remember.
Based on my arguments. So,
and see, that's what I had hoped for with Cornel West, where look, there's an opportunity to bring everyone together here. And when you come out calling people neo-fascists right out the gate, man, you're already alienating these people. There are a lot of people that voted for Obama and then voted for Trump because, like I said, I was arguing with some shit lib, brunch lib interlopers earlier on the Twitter. And you know what? I need to be much more kind about how I approach these people because I think that they mean well at the end of the day, and I need to remember that. But I just get so frustrated with these people because everyone's a racist. And the idea is like, hey, you know what? Like you can call anyone a racist, but come to the table with some evidence here because that's a pretty hefty claim. And anyway, I totally lost the point of what I was talking about. But the point is we need to bring people together. And again, that was one of the reasons I was disappointed with Cornel West because I was excited about the prospect of having a coalition of maybe some red and blue people that it's like, hey, we can put aside our differences on maybe gun violence or something or gun regulations and work together on getting public health care and getting a living wage and, ending frivolous wars and all that kind of stuff. But I need to shut up and get out of the way.
So that's right there. That's a win. That's a victory. And so just like Frederick Douglass said, I will join with anyone to do good and no one to do bad. Anyone
or universal health care. Remember that, how he moved on that one too? He actually talked about moving positive. He's like, you know what?
That's a great point. Tucker Carlson came around.
Before I wouldn't even thought about thinking of that universal health care was good. And he changed his mind on it. And so Anderson Cooper would never. So
What else is depressing to me is Cornel West's incuriousness and his lack of interest in seeing the bigger picture.
This is what I wanted to cover.
I would like to see him push back against the Russiagate narrative, which was a DNC, Hillary Clinton, FBI, CIA op, just like January 6th was.
Yeah.
He came on and repeated FBI talking points on my show when failing to see the connection, how the establishment, not only in America, but worldwide, there's a global cabal of capitalists that run things. And they're moving on to not only narrative control and censorship, but they're moving on to criminalizing their political opposition. They're doing it with Stop Cop City, the same jury that indicted, they used the RICO laws. So RICO laws, if people don't know, those were invented.
They're making Trump look like Tony Soprano.
To go after the mafia,
like drug dealers and mafia, international criminals. Yeah.
And now they're using it for former presidents. And how Cornel, I think it's on purpose. He's pretending not to see the connection between them criminalizing the Stop Cop City protesters, because that's what they're doing. They're criminalizing protesters against the establishment using the RICO laws. And they're doing the exact same thing to Donald Trump. Now, again,
so once again, in fairness, on my show, he did acknowledge the similarities and how wrong it was, which makes it interesting that he quoted FBI talking points on your show because he directly mentioned COINTELPRO on my show.
So and maybe it was good that he had that contentious interview with me, because it seems like he's got his head straight on some things afterwards, and that's he's calling out Jim Crow Joe and Trump the same way. He sees the connection now between. He was just repeating that at January 6th stuff is such garbage. This idea that they were.
And I showed some clips of Breakfast Club because he was on with Charlemagne, and that interview, if you haven't seen it, of Cornel West with Charlemagne, I love Charlemagne, and I think that interview is great. But the one point that I just couldn't get with is they're like, oh, those guys tried to overthrow the government, and Jimmy makes this point all the time. I think it's a great one. Those like Trump supporters are typically gun nuts. How come none of them had guns? Even Ashley Babbitt, who was shot by the cop, didn't have a gun, and so it's like these kind of mental lapses, or these very glaring little factoids get kind of lost in the dramatics. Anyway,
trying to overthrow the government. You mean a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts showed up to overthrow the government and they forgot to bring their guns? Oh, I knew I forgot something. I had water, mittens, scarves, but I forgot the guns. Of course, they were just pissed off protesters who thought that the government, that someone stole their election, just like the other half of the country thought that Russia had stolen their election for 4 years, and nobody called them anti-American insurrectionists. But half of those people got pushed in by FBI plants in the crowd. We know this. They Niko, they had twice as much security for a forced to vote rally than they had for those people, and they knew they were coming for months and months. This is exactly what the FBI and CIA intelligence community does. They create this so they can now criminalize Trump and his political movement. That was the whole point of them doing January.
And they did the same shit to the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X's. And I'm not comparing Trump to Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. I'm comparing the tactics that get used against a threat to the establishment. And let's be honest, Bernie Sanders was no threat to the establishment. That guy folded very quickly. Trump is independently wealthy. He already has a network of political contacts so he's a legitimate threat to the establishment. You have to see that, whether you agree with everything the guy says or not. And, I think Jimmy is 1000% correct, and it's good to see, hopefully, that Cornel West is taking this criticism to heart and becoming better from it, because Jimmy's 1000% correct. There is a coalition he can build very easily if he focuses on these issues and lands with integrity on them. The January 6th, the COVID thing, Biden being every bit as big of a fascist, if not more of one, than Trump. That is a unifying message for a lot of people. And I think that's the point that Jimmy's trying to make. And he's so passionate and he gets so frustrated. I can see it in his face. But anyway, watch that whole interview. Niko House, one of the best, like one of the OGs in this space. Like, he's been doing it for a long time, since like as long as I can remember, even before Nick and CJ. So, and Sabby and all them. He's one of the first people I remember seeing in the space, even before Jimmy Dore. So props to Niko House. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about here, since we're on the subject of the working class, is the newly minted UAW strike. And actually, props to Due Dissidents for pointing out this guy Sean Fain is an absolute legend, the UAW union boss. And if you have not seen this piece of film, I think you are going to enjoy it. Now, here's another thing, and I keep bringing this up because I live in Hollywood, and I don't live in Hollywood, but I live Hollywood adjacent. Who else is on strike, people? The fucking actors, the directors, all on strike. So there is a possibility here, I think, of unification, maybe, here, let's try this. I'm going to fuck with some different views. Let's try this. Check this out.
We've won together. Today, America's auto workers are in the fight of our lives. The fight for a decent standard of living. The fight for wages that grow with inflation. The fight to retire with dignity. The fight to protect our communities against plant closures. The the fight for better work-life balance so we can see our children grow up and our parents grow old. Winning these demands will take all of us fighting together. It will take a return to our roots. Collective action gave birth to our great union. After years of facing down company thugs, spies, and anti-union laws that favored big business, the auto workers in Flint, Michigan took decisive action. In 1937, they occupied General Motors plants and set off an organizing firestorm in our country. After a few tense months, GM Auto Workers emerged victorious. They had won their union and a contract. The creativity, discipline, and defiant spirit of auto workers was contagious. The sit-down strike sparked a strike wave that quickly spread across the entire working class, everywhere from auto plants to department stores. Nearly 400,000 workers across the U.S. participated in sit-down strikes in 1937, giving birth to a new industrial labor movement. We are once again returning to our roots and reclaiming our tradition of holding the line for working people against unchecked corporate power. That is why we are launching a new kind of strike against Ford, GM, and Stellantis. This is our generation's answer to the sit-down strike of the 1930s. We're calling it the stand-up strike. This is a strike that starts small and builds over time as more and more of us stand up and join the fight. This is a strike that keeps the companies guessing as to where and when the next local will walk out.
Smart.
And just as importantly, we are striking the big three, all three. We told them September 14th is a deadline, and we meant it. The big three have made $250 billion over the last 10 years. They made $21 billion in profits in the first half of this year alone. We will not stand by as corporate executives in the rich continue to make extraordinary profits while the rest of us continue to get left further and further behind. And I want to be clear, our goal is not to strike. Our goal is to bargain a fair contract. But if we have to strike to win economic and social justice, then we will shut down the big three. We are not afraid to fight for what we deserve. We will stand up for ourselves. We will stand up for our families. We will stand up for our communities. So UAW family, be ready. If your local is called to stand up, I know you'll meet the moment, just like the generations that came before us did.
So you get the idea. That is some fantastic stuff. And again, my head keeps going, okay, I love this stand-up strike. Why not get the rail workers involved? Why not get the actors involved? Why not get the writers involved? Why not get everyone together and do a stand-up strike across industries, nurses, teachers? I mean, you see where I'm getting, right? Like, anyway, if my stream is still on, let's keep going. I'm sure it's on Rumble. Rumble, God bless those people for creating that safe space. You know, YouTube has been better lately. I will give them, and obviously, you know, YouTube's platform is far more developed and vast, and there's a much bigger audience there. But Rumble has something, and I love what they're doing. I love the open marketplace, the freedom of expression, and that's what America is and should be all about, right? Okay, let's move on real quick. The other day was the anniversary of 9/11, so we'll breeze through this, but if you haven't seen this yet, this is crazy as shit. But Max Blumenthal and the Gray Zone did this report. I believe it was your boy Kit Clarenberg. Bombshell filing, 9/11 hijackers were CIA recruits. At least 2 9/11 hijackers had been recruited into a joint CIA-Saudi intelligence operation that was covered up at the highest level, according to an explosive new court filing. A newly released court filing raises grave questions about the relationship between Alex Station a CIA unit set up to track Al-Qaeda chief Osama bin Laden and his associates, and 2 9/11 hijackers leading to the attacks, which was the subject of a cover-up at the highest levels of the FBI, attained by Spy Talk. The filings, a 21-page declaration by Don Canestraro, a lead investigator for the Office of Military Commissions, the legal body overseeing the cases of the 9/11 defendants. It summarizes classified government and discovery and disclosures and private interviews to be conducted with anonymous high-ranking CIA and FBI officials. Many agents who spoke to Canestraro headed up Operation Encore, the Bureau's aborted long-running probe into the Saudi government connections to the 9/11 attack. A 50-50 chance. So anyway, just the headline alone that they can, I don't need to read all the details, but the headline alone that they can tie all that stuff together is pretty damning. And then I have a couple other gems for you here. This bonus content I just wanted to share. And this is actually a really great segue to our next segment too. So don't get mad at me for sharing Laura Loomer content, but this is just too good. It's just too good. So this is Trump on 9/11. Listen to this.
I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through this deal? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly, because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid, and it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
That was a very cryptic statement he made there at the end, wasn't it? Jesus Christ. Well, I mean, so basically, how much the establishment hates Donald Trump, and that right there is a good example of why. Just the candor that he has right there in that clip, talking about, the planes hitting. He's like, that's not just a plane. He straight up just said that. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what he said in the clip. That, wow, that's more, and so that level of candor is just too much for establishment figures. And the reason I set that up the way I did is I want you to see this clip. This is from a Tucker Carlson broadcast, and it's about Richard Nixon, and it's a little bit long. It's not that long though. I want you to sit through it because it's going to lead us into our conversation about Calfiornia, because Nixon obviously was from California. So was Reagan. So was Arnold Schwarzenegger. But this blew my mind, and it reminded me of another thing that we're going to go over. But basically this next segment is going to be about Nixon. So let's start with this clip from Tucker Carlson. And I want you to see this because it blew me away. And it's a TikTok thing. TikTok's got a lot of the best content at the moment. I'm not going to lie. But just watch this real quick.
Richard Nixon. Yet somehow, without a single vote being cast by a single American voter, Richard Nixon was kicked out of office and replaced by the only unelected president in American history. So we went from the most popular president to a president nobody voted for. Wait a minute, you may ask. Why didn't I know that? Wasn't Richard Nixon a criminal? Wasn't he despised by all decent people? No, he wasn't. In fact, if any president could claim to be the people's choice, it was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was reelected in 1972 by the largest margin of the popular vote ever recorded before or since. Nixon got 17 million more votes than his opponent. Less than 2 years later, he was gone. He was forced to resign. And in his place, an obedient servant of the federal agencies called Gerald Ford took over the White House. How did that happen? Well, it's a long story, but here are the highlights, and they tell you a lot. Richard Nixon believed that elements in the federal bureaucracy were working to undermine the American system of government and had been doing that for a long time. He often said that. He was absolutely right. On June 23rd, 1972, Nixon met with the then CIA director Richard Helms at the White House. During the conversation, which thankfully was tape recorded, Nixon suggested he knew, quote, who shot John, meaning President John F. Kennedy. Nixon further implied that the CIA was directly involved in Kennedy's assassination, which we now know it was. Helms's telling response? Total silence. But for Nixon, it didn't matter because it was already over. 4 days before, on June 19th, the Washington Post had published the first of many stories about a break-in at the Watergate office building. Unbeknownst to Nixon and unreported by the Washington Post, 4 of the 5 burglars worked for the CIA. The first.
Did you hear that? 4 of the 5 burglars in the Watergate that broke into Watergate were CIA. And Nixon was talking about who assassinated Kennedy. And we're going to get into some other things about Nixon that I'm sure you probably heard, but we're going to revisit them. But anyway, keep
First of many dishonest Watergate stories was written by a 29-year-old Metro reporter called Bob Woodward. Who exactly was Bob Woodward? Well, he wasn't a journalist. Bob Woodward had no background whatsoever in the news business. Instead, Bob Woodward came directly from the classified areas of the federal government. Shortly before Watergate, Woodward was a naval officer at the Pentagon. He had a top secret clearance. He worked regularly with the intel agencies. At times, Woodward was even detailed to the Nixon White House, where he interacted with Richard Nixon's top aides. Soon after leaving the Navy, for reasons that have never been clear, Woodward was hired by the most powerful news outlet in Washington and assigned the biggest story in the country. And just to make it crystal clear what was actually happening, Woodward's main source for his Watergate series was the deputy director of the FBI, Mark Felt. And Mark Felt ran, and we're not making this up, the FBI's COINTELPRO program, which was designed to secretly discredit political actors the federal agencies wanted to destroy, people like Richard Nixon. And at the same time, those same agencies were also working to take down Nixon's elected vice president, Spiro Agnew. In the fall of 1973, Agnew was indicted for tax evasion and forced to resign. His replacement was a colorless congressman from Grand Rapids called Gerald Ford. What was Ford's qualification for the job? Well, he had served on the Warren Commission, which absolved the CIA of responsibility for President Kennedy's murder. Nixon was strong-armed into accepting Gerald Ford by Democrats in Congress. Quote, "We gave Nixon no choice but Ford," Speaker of the House Carl Albert later boasted. 8 months later, Gerald Ford of the Warren Commission was the president of the United States. See how that works? So those are the facts, not speculation. All of that actually happened. None of it's secret. Most of it actually is on Wikipedia. But no mainstream news organization has ever told that story. It's so obvious, yet it's intentionally ignored. And as a result, permanent Washington remains in charge of our political system. Unelected lifers in the federal agencies make the biggest decisions in American government and crush anyone who tries to rein them in.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Tucker Carlson is a white supremacist. And I've got pot throat. Ugh. That's why Tucker Carlson is a white supremacist. Isn't that crazy? Like, have you ever put those? Okay, now couple that with the reality of who Richard Nixon actually was. Okay. This is a great article from Medium. And I'm just going to share a little bit of this with you but I will link all this stuff in the. I need to start doing that, linking all this stuff in the description. But check this out. So this is an article from Medium called "Nixon the Progressive." The judgment of history is sometimes a fluid affair. Each generation has its own interpretation of the people and events that preceded it. When these views conflict with the established historical narrative, it begs the question, why the new attitude? Sometimes it's simply a matter of our natural evolution as a society. Other times, though, it's due to the influence of a prevailing social or political view. Take Richard Nixon, for example. In a long political career that spanned the Cold War, Nixon broke ground and made achievements in foreign. Okay, so I'm gonna all this bullshit aside. Let's go up here to Nixon's progressive bona fides. Now, I'm not gonna go through all this again. I'll put the link in the description, but just listen to some of the stuff that this guy was pushing before they politically smeared and ousted him as president. Before the security state politically smeared and ousted him as president. Let's start with the environment. The fate of the earth was a major topic of concern when Nixon became president in 1969. Now, remember, Nixon was a Californian as well, hippie. Environmental activism had grown. I'm not saying he was a hippie. I'm joking, obviously, but he was from California. Grown steadily throughout the 1960s, spurred on by Rachel Carson's 1963 Game Changer book, Silent Spring. Within days after Nixon took office in 1969, the nation was reeling from a massive oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara, California, the largest ever up to that time. A few months later, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio burst into flame because it was so polluted. Yes, you read that right. A river caught fire. Nixon signed the National Environmental Policy Act on January 1st, 1970. This law called upon federal agencies to evaluate the environmental consequences of their actions through assessments and impact studies. Federal projects could now be amended, postponed, or killed by virtue of their negative impact on the environment, significantly expanding the federal bureaucracy, but all in a good way. Later in 1970, Nixon signed the order establishing the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA was designed to be the final word on the environment. The agency has grown immensely powerful over the years, and it has the capability to alter, amend, or end any business practice deemed to have an adverse effect on the environment. The EPA was not the last word Nixon would have on the environment. He also signed into law the Clean Air Act in 1970, the Clean Water Act in 1972, the Endangered Species Act in 1973. There was also the Noise Control Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and the Safe Drinking Water Act. Nixon also weighed in on the social safety net. He signed the Social Security Amendments of 1972, which extended Medicare to people under 65 who were disabled or who suffered from kidney disease. Another component of these amendments was the Supplemental Security Income Program. SSI came about after complaints arose over the uneven income and disability standards of various state-level benefits packages. These state aid programs were federalized and folded into a national system. It's worth noting here that during Nixon's time in office, spending on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid all increased, with the total spending on entitlements more than doubling between 1969 and 1975. Nixon even got into the debate over health insurance and access to health care, proposing that all employers should offer insurance to full-time employees and federal aid program to pick up the tab for those too poor to afford coverage. He also proposed pegging insurance premiums to income and the creation of health maintenance organizations to help manage the cost of care. Though many of these ideas did not see the light of day during Nixon's time in office, they would form the basis of many modern healthcare-related reform programs. Nixon declared war on cancer with the National Cancer Act and provided $1.6 billion to close to $10 billion in today's dollars for research. The National Sickle Cell Anemia Control Act similarly set research money aside to combat sickle cell disease. The nation's workers were given OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, which was created in 1970 to establish federal government oversight of workplace safety. The Consumer Product Safety Act of 1972 allowed the government to create safety standards and issue product recalls for items created that created unreasonable risk to consumers. Drivers were told to keep it under 55 miles per hour when Nixon imposed a national speed limit in January 1974 to help reduce fuel consumption. Prior to the new law, states were free to set their own speed limits, but Congress and the president took that power away after price spikes by Middle Eastern oil producers sent gas prices skyrocketing. Nixon took grief for defunding a number of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs like the Job Corps, but in its place, Nixon created the Office of Minority Business Enterprise to promote and support minority-owned businesses. He also worked to actively increase the number of minorities hired for construction jobs, one of the nation's first examples of affirmative action. Nixon called for a mandatory minimum of minority employees on all federal contract jobs worth more than $50,000. Nixon also called for the expansion of the U.S. Civil Rights Code to include sex discrimination. This led directly to the creation of Title IX, Title IX, which banned sexual discrimination in education. Title IX became a big booster of women in college sports, increasing women's participation from 1 in 27 in 1972 to 2 in 5 in 2012. Nixon also voiced support for the Equal Rights Amendment, which made it so you get the idea. I could read the rest of these. Many of the programs, agencies, and initiatives in this list are common knowledge among American public. Their impact is undeniable, even if their wisdom is open to debate. But few people realize that they all came about during the 6 years Richard Nixon was in the White House. So do you see why Richard Nixon was a problem and the parallels to, I mean, and I'm not saying Trump is this level of progressive, but when you really look at the raw data, Trump did pass the First Step Act, which, I mean, I don't know a lot about the details of Trump's policy wins during his presidency. I should research more maybe. But I do know the First Step Act is way more progressive for prison reform and way more beneficial to minority groups than anything Joe Biden has done, because he's basically continued Trump era border policy, which, I mean, Trump era border policy was disjointed and stupid like it's always been, because people make money off that problem continuing. There's cheap labor involved. So I've always said, and I will say it again, I will keep repeating this until I die probably, but if you want to stop illegal immigration, go hard on the companies that are hiring. Go hard on the people enabling it, the enablers. No, there's no money in that. There's political backlash in that, because those people have lawyers and they'll fight you on it. And it, more than anyone, the Mitt Romneys of the world and the Walmarts, the people who hire illegal help, are the ones enabling the problem and keeping it flowing. Because if people came here illegally and they were unable to get work, they wouldn't keep coming. That's the reality. So anyway, I don't think that it would completely end the problem, but I think it would be a lot more effective than what we currently do. So I wanted to take this Nixon train into the hatred of California, because I want to be honest. I love California. It's my home. It's my state. It has a lot of great history behind it. And it's a vast fucking state. And so to look at one little piece of it and judge it by that, I think is unfair. And there is a homelessness problem here. There definitely is. But I think California is also a political wedge, because it's easy to point at Hollywood and Silicon Valley and go, those people are bad in Middle America, and people feel good about that. And I understand it, and I love Middle America. I love cities like Des Moines. I love cities like Austin. I love the cities that I've been to anyway. I grew up mostly in Utah, so I know Middle America, but I love California. And I'm going to explain to you real quick a couple things that just make California a great place. But also to the fact that a lot of people know this, maybe a lot of people don't, but California, if it was its own country, would be the 5th largest economy in the world. And I just want to show you some of the data points on this, because it's pretty interesting. But California's GDP in 2022 was 3.6 trillion, representing 14.3% of the total U.S. economy. If California were a country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world and more productive than India and the United Kingdom. And here's kind of the rankings. United States, obviously, number 1, China, Japan, Germany, and California right here at number 5. above India, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Canada. Wow. Even Canada. That just goes to show sizes and everything, right? So anyway, I show you that not to brag, but just to make the point that California is a vast, vast state. We have a lot of what the U.S. actually sells now, which is Silicon Valley and Hollywood, and even that's changing. I was talking to a guy the other day who's a grip in Hollywood, and because of the strike, things are down. But this guy can work because he's a grip. He does technical work that can be used on any film production set. So he can work for YouTube. He can work for TV. He can work for film. He's like a trade, right? That's a smart trade, but like I was saying earlier, the actors and the writers and the UAW and the rail union and the nurses union and the teachers union and all these unions need to get together and do this stand-up strike together. But that aside, back to California, it's a state that I think tries its best to take care of people, and we've been ahead of the curve on a lot of issues. And so just to give you an example, there's the California Environmental Quality Act. And rather than share, I'm just going to read this to you. But it was passed in 1970 and signed into law by then Governor Ronald Reagan, shortly after the United States passed the National Environmental Policy Act, which was passed by, as you know, Richard Nixon. To institute a statewide policy for environmental protection. The CEQA does not directly regulate land uses, but anyway, point being is California has been ahead of the curve on a lot of stuff. And I'll give you an example of how California supports workers' rights more than a lot of other places. So just to tell you a little story, I used to work in sales, right? And I had an employer who owed me quite a bit of money. It was a 5-figure number, and they were not paying me this commission that they clearly owed me. I had the receipts, and so what California has is a state labor board, and what you can do is in that kind of a situation where you're working as a contractor, you file a complaint with a state labor board, and the California State Labor Board assigns you a rep. And then that rep kind of helps you build a case, or you basically sets a hearing with the employer and hears out the case and tries to mediate a solution. And so literally, as soon as I created that relationship and the state labor board started sending letters to my former employer, he paid me the commission because he's like, oh shit, I don't want to go deal with the labor board. Holy shit. So a similar thing happened, with other, I've had other similar situations, but I don't know if you can do, if Texas has a state labor board or not. Maybe they do, but I just wanted to share a couple other little things with you real quick that kind of show some of the differences, or, just to give you a quick idea, just to defend my state a little bit. So California employment law, how is it different from other states? When it comes to employment law, California stands apart from many other states due to its robust protections for workers. While federal employment laws set the baseline for worker protections, state laws can and do expand on these rights in this realm. California has established itself as a leader. With some of the most comprehensive worker protection laws in the country, this article will highlight some of the ways in which California employment laws differ from those in other states, and an experienced employment lawyer can give you specific advice for your individual case. So this is a legal site. So wage and hour laws. California law exceeds federal requirements in several areas related to wages and working hours. The state minimum wage in California is higher than the federal minimum wage, and in many cities, California have implemented their own local minimum wages that are even higher. So this is one of the reasons that there's such a hateful narrative towards California, because they give more to the worker. Furthermore, California law requires employers to provide meal and rest breaks, and it imposes stricter overtime requirements than federal law. In California, non-exempt employees are entitled to overtime pay, 1 to 5 times the regular rate of pay for any hours beyond 8 or single workday and beyond 40 in a work week. Additionally, any work beyond 12 hours in a workday is subject to double the regular rate of pay. That's in California. Discrimination and harassment laws. While federal law prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex, pregnancy, religion, age of the employee at least 40, disability, California's Fair Employment and Housing Act includes additional protected categories such as marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, etc. So we were ahead of the curve on all that stuff you love, all those, identity politics issues that y'all love so much. Family and medical leave, and this is a big one, I think. While federal Family and Medical Leave Act provides up to 12 weeks for unpaid leave for eligible employees, California's Family Rights Act expands those protections as of 2021. The CFRA covers employers with 5 or more employees and allows eligible employees to take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave, not only for their own serious health conditions or to care for a family member, but also to bond with a new child. Worker classification. California has adopted the strict ABC test for determining whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor. This test presumes a worker is an employee unless the employer can prove the worker is free from the employer's control and direction, the worker performs work outside the usual course of the employer's business, and the worker is customarily engaged in independently established trade, occupation, or business. This makes it harder for California employers to classify workers as independent contractors compared to employers in other states. At-will employment exceptions, and we'll leave it there. The point is, a lot of the hate for California is based on, people that don't want to have to deal with these protections for workers. And yeah, if you're a business person, if you run a business, it's a pain in the ass, but it's also there for a reason, and it's a good reason. So the last thing I want to show you is I was looking at stats on who has a worse homeless problem, California or Texas. And I thought this was so great because it's just, say what you want about Hollywood, but we try to be honest out here and check out what this says. For one thing, Texas homeless population, and this is from Cal Matters. This is a calmatters.org. For one thing, Texas homeless population shrunk by nearly a third over the past decade, while California's grew by 43%, according to the federally mandated point-in-time count. And in the Golden State, 439 people are homeless for every 100,000 residents, compared to 81 in the Lone Star State. Wow, that's crazy. Can California Homeless Services get similar results by copying Texas? It's not that simple. Things are very different in California, and here's a brief look at why. So I just thought it was big of them to admit that Texas builds more homes than California. Everything is just way more expensive in California. Yeah. Little state funding for Texas cities, but outsized federal resources. Houston cleans up when it comes to federal funding. Okay. Yeah. So as with anything, these arguments have nuance. And when you kind of really get into the details, the devil's in the details, right? So anyway, the Nixon thing is wild. And, California, for all it's good, also produced Reagan, who I think is one of the worst presidents of all time. Just one of the most corrupt, business-driven, bean counter presidents of all time. And, I'm sorry. Okay, so moving on. I got 2 more things to share with you, and we're going to cut out. But this first thing is from your boy, Max Blumenthal, down at the gray zone. And these guys do, some of the best, obviously, do some of the best journalism out there. Also your boy Aaron Mate on the scene. But what they're talking about here kind of ties back to the whole censorship thing, what I was talking about earlier with Dr. Berg and how the censorship thing is getting out of control. They are talking about the ADL here. and just how any criticism now of Israel or anything like that gets labeled as racism. And it's the same. You see this pattern applied with the Ukraine war, for example. If you criticize the Ukraine war, you ask questions that are uncomfortable, you're Putin. You work with Putin. Obviously, you are pro-Russia. How dare you? Why do you not blindly support the war effort? You know? And it's the same thing with this this whole censorship regime and the Ukraine thing. It's like if you don't just blindly fall in the line and go, I support this, then you're a Putin puppet, obviously, right? So Max and these guys, they really lay out the effects of the current censorship regime and kind of what the ADL is doing right here. So I'll just let you watch a little bit of this with me. Talk about
and
it.
they might have, and since then, I see, like, it's so bipartisan, and like neocons of either party, they unite around the same talking point. Like Ukraine, it's like, what's his name, Senator Murphy, Chris Murphy, John McCain going to the Maidan. This was a bipartisan policy. So there's been such a closing of ranks on this that I wouldn't be surprised that they ultimately, if George Kent, who's a Republican, ended up backing up Biden. But that's not because I think he's concerned with facts, because all they care about is using Ukraine for a neocon agenda. And that's where Democrats and Republicans from the establishment have totally aligned, along with all progressive Democrats now. Not one of them has voted once against funding Ukraine proxy war.
Yeah.
Fucking sad.
Yeah. So I think we've fully established that there's a giant effort right now to crush the will of the public, which for the first time shows in polls that it does not support military aid to Ukraine anymore. There's a Wall Street Journal report me and Wyatt talked about last week about the plan to lock in Ukraine support with a memorandum of understanding that will insulate it against political changes like the election of Trump, for example. And so it's just another way of just ignoring what the public wants while forcing it to pay for a giant war. And that's partly what Blinken's trip was about. When Blinken leaves the State Department, he'll go back to like West Exec Advisors, the consulting firm he founded, and he'll make money off the continuation of that war through getting contracts for the arms makers, making tons of money. Another way the public is being suffocated, silenced, is just through the censorship industrial complex. And I did want to talk about that since one of the key arms of this complex, which is the least accountable to the public because it's not even a government entity, but it works closely with the government, is the Anti-Defamation League. The Anti-Defamation League, founded as B'nai B'rith, claims to act in the name of the quote unquote Jewish people. It was founded initially to stop the defamation of the Jewish people, to fight anti-Semitism. And it has now expanded its mission to simply stop hate.
So I always go to Max for these types of issues since he's Jewish, just FYI.
And their slogan,
and so is Aaron,
again at their conferences, is imagine a world without hate. They've moved into Silicon Valley and they've been partnering with the FBI to pressure social media platforms to remove certain accounts. Of course, they accuse them of anti-Semitism, and their new campaign is against Elon Musk since he took over Twitter, because Elon is a rogue. He may not have the best intentions with Twitter. His intentions may be to hoover up enormous amounts of data and to use it.
So I like Max's take here because I have the same take. I respect Elon Musk and I like his style in a lot of ways because, I'm a heterosexual male who's like, oh, what a cool jet setter guy. Like he's like Tony Stark or whatever. I have that cheesy, corny, straight white male side of me. But I'm still skeptical because he's a rich, powerful guy. And I feel like these guys kind of have the same, maybe they're not as fanboyish as I am, but you know, I knew from day one with Twitter it wasn't going to be about free speech, and it isn't. It's better, marginally better than Facebook or Instagram, but it's not free speech
for his own malign ends. But since coming into Twitter, what he has done is he has broken the stranglehold over Twitter that the hegemonic force in US politics, which is interwoven with the Democratic Party and many people crudely refer to as the deep state, as well as elements of the Republican Party, the FBI, the DHS, the national security state, and the kind of corporate, the kind of woke politics that work in corporations but don't actually serve the majority of working class Americans, elite kind of stuff. He broke their stranglehold over Twitter. He ended the state affiliated media labels, which was a top priority for the DHS. I mean, they're so mad about that. There's still stories about that. He seems to have stopped throttling us. I mean, I'm finally getting likes that are proportionate to the amount of followers I have. Somewhat. He's doing all kinds of weird stuff. That's Twitter's buggier. The algorithm changes all the time. It's weird. And
The new name sucks.
This is great.
X, it looks like a porn site. X.com. The logo sucks. It looks like something like we would have designed initially for the gray zone and then like thrown out after a week or two. So there's all kinds of criticisms that you can have of him, but the ADL is just going after him, trading on its reputation as a defender of the Jewish community, an ill-gotten reputation to be sure, but trading on that, exploiting Jewish historical suffering to advance the agenda and power-hungry, malevolent imperatives of the hegemonic political force in the U.S., which is now it's centered in the Biden administration. And so this doesn't really have anything to do with Jewish power, in my opinion. But what the ADL is doing through the backlash it's created, because somebody who happens to be one of the 3 richest men in the world, who's extremely powerful and who the government often depends on for quote unquote innovation, the deep state, the national security state, it's depending on him for Starlink in Ukraine to provide them with communications, is actually pushing back. And a lot of and so what the pushback has done, this is just a fact. It is increasing anti-Semitic rhetoric because the ADL presents itself as Jewish. It's being exposed for trying to throttle people's voices, suppress them through undemocratic hidden means. And some people are blaming all Jews. So
that's a great point that I had never thought of. The stuff that they're doing to like censor people is actually sparking more like, you know, people anger against the Jewish community by people. The ADL, the stuff the ADL is doing, it's not even the Jewish community that's doing it. It's the ADL doing it on using, as Max said, the suffering of the Jewish people as a vehicle.
I argue that Jewish Americans are not well served by an organization like the ADL running around claiming to act on our behalf and shutting down debate, crushing the First Amendment, working with the FBI and DHS to do so, and attacking anyone who says anything against a foreign system of apartheid taking place 5,000 miles from the US, accusing them of being racist Jew haters who need to be basically criminalized, and that we could reduce anti-Semitism by simply having no ADL. So that's my opening rant. But me and Aaron, we're Jewish. We're opposed. I'll speak for myself. I'm an anti-Zionist. I'm completely opposed to the existence or the imposition of an exclusivist Jewish state through force and demographic management on an indigenous population. It's been a disaster. That itself increases anti-Semitism. So we've been critics of the ADL for a long time, and the ADL has targeted me directly. Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL, personally was calling on Hillary Clinton to denounce me throughout the 2016 presidential campaign. I mean, I could spend the next hour talking about why that is, but he was just obsessed with getting the Clinton campaign to denounce me. And they did. I had nothing to do with them. Both the Trump campaign and the Clinton campaign denounced me as an anti-Semite. I think I'm the only person with that.
That's how you know you're doing good work. That's like the barometer for good work, right?
And it was Jake
Both
Sullivan did.
Trump and Clinton denounced him as an anti-Semite, and he's Jewish.
He wrote a letter or a statement on Hillary's behalf. I don't even know if Hillary signed off on it, but it was Jake Sullivan. But anyway,
you were criticizing Elie Wiesel for basically associating with Nazi apologists, right? Wasn't that the impetus?
Yeah, for hanging out with like Pastor John Hagee, who said that the Antichrist was half Jewish and homosexual with fierce features, and like Elie Wiesel just getting money from him because he's a corrupt slime bag. So I said it anyway. I don't want to get lost in that. The point is the ADL they go after the Defamation League. They've gone after so many people. They extort people. They extorted Kyrie Irving because he made some like silly comments that were like derived from Black Hebrew Israelite ideology, and they used it to extort $500,000 from him. He was forced to give them $500,000 after they condemned him as an anti-Semite. They love to humiliate Black public figures, especially who are seen as non-compliant. They're always attacking Roger Waters. They were at the forefront of the campaign to portray him as an anti-Semite for mocking a fascist demagogue in his show, which draws from the wall. There
it is.
Abe Foxman, their former CEO, he announced that he was canceling his subscription to the New York Times because they showed photos of children killed by Israel during its last military campaign in the Gaza Strip. They're just disgusting anti-Palestinian racists. They take cops every year. They take about 50 to 100 police leaders to Israel to tour the apartheid wall and to lobby them on Israel as a model for policing in the U.S. Think about that. Israel sees Palestinians as terrorists. So the cops learn to see American civilians as potential terrorists through their trip to Israel with the ADL. And
that's wild.
Let's go back to.
Anyway, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on that. I think that it just kind of hammers home the point of how the HR department has been weaponized against us all. And it's like, no one's going to come at you with a merit-based argument anymore. They're going to smear you as a racist or a homophobe or a transphobe or a TERF or, whatever that is. And it's, I don't take people seriously who go that route. You can't, but there's a lot of it these days. And going back to the Jimmy Cornel West thing, I really truly hope that Cornel West can kind of see past the whole like white supremacist demonization thing that's being done to an Ice Cube. Okay. Ice Cube was being called a white supremacist because he talked to Tucker Carlson. The guy who wrote "Fuck the Police" was Ice Cube. I mean, that's when it's just ridiculous. That's when it really reaches a fever pitch that's just beyond insane at that point. Trying to call Ice Cube a white supremacist. And I don't know how people, it's like with the Putin thing, like it's gotten to such a ridiculous point when someone's like, oh, that guy you must work for Putin. How do you do anything but laugh if you're a thinking person? You know what I mean? Like when you see, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, she works for Putin. Yeah, the lady who did 2 tours of duty for her country and served honorably as a congressperson and is just an all-around good person. Yeah, that lady works for Putin because she said something you didn't like. Are you kidding me? It's how do people wrap their heads around it? I don't know. But I got one more thing I'm going to lay on you before we take off. I thought this was funny. this is like a funny, lighthearted thing to end on, because there was like 12 other things I wanted to talk about, but I don't want to spend all night sitting in front of y'all. But this is one of those things I came across on Twitter that I just thought was pretty funny. So I'm going to share it with you, and we're going to watch it. And I didn't even watch the whole thing, so hopefully it doesn't take some kind of weird turn that I'm unaware of and do something super crazy. It's pretty crazy to begin with. I'm going to be honest. Like it's a comedy thing. It's a political comedy thing that's taking jabs at Pelosi and Trump and the whole. Here, let's see if we can get this a little bigger for you. I've noticed my screen shares don't seem to. Okay, here we go. Check this out. Let's see if that. Yeah, that's much better. All right, watch this.
Bing bong bong bing bing bing.
So, oh, sorry. What AI is capable of these days is pretty crazy.
Just what I needed now. A wino and a rhino. Well, Papa, you gonna help me with this garden now? Son, I did my part. I got us a scarecrow. This is guaranteed to scare away slugs and snails and birds. Just remember that the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Hallelujah. And you remember when you look in the mirror tonight, the Lord gave you that face and you stuck with it.
These old sitcoms just roast were like roast
Let me
jokes.
tell you something. Every time I see you, it makes me wish that birth control was retroactive.
You think there's
Why don't
some?
you start helping us out in the kitchen? All right.
There's got to be some deep that you like. This just made me realize there's got to be some deep sexual tension between Trump and Nancy Pelosi, right? Like Pelosi's got like the the rack and everything, and Trump is like the Miss Universe guy. He's like, hey Pelosi, there's some nice cans you got there.
You start by sticking your face in the freezer and making us some ugly sickles. I don't like being alone in the house with a married man. Listen, if we were alone on a raft in the middle of the ocean, I'd rather kiss an octopus in the mouth. Today is my lucky day. Why? Because you looked in the mirror and it didn't break? What do you want? I'm the winner of your lucky number contest, and I want my money. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the money I got coming on this ticket, turkey. You call me a turkey again, I'll base you with a couple of these. Why'd you go someplace else? Why'd you go?
These old shows are so funny to watch, but you did not do that today.
Who you calling ugly, sucker? You. I could throw some tracing paper over your head and draw me a moose face. Who you calling a
Okay, so anyway,
I'm no
that goes on
criminal.
way longer than it should. What's actually funny about it too isn't even the language or anything. It's just the expressions that their faces make. That's where the AI is out of control. But anyway, if you're out there watching tonight, thank you so much for tuning in. There is a bunch more stuff, and I'm really trying to get into streaming more often. But the way that the economy is, I'm sure with work and everything, it's tough these days to find the time to do the things that you actually want to do. And I really do. I sit through the week and I pick apart these kind of items, and I make notes on my phone, whatever, and I easily put together a list of things. And today it was like there was like 20 things on it, and I went like, nah, I got to cut a couple things, and So anyway, this is something that I really enjoy. So I absolutely appreciate the responses and people in the comments. Shout out to my boy Willie Bragg and co. I've been catching Bragland. You guys are doing some quality work over there. So keep up the good work out there. And I will be back on. Hopefully, I try to get on every Wednesday, so you can always usually count on me being on Wednesday night. But I want to get more frequent with this. I still have clips to edit from back when Willie and I did our show together in August, I think, or was it August, or was it even before that? It might have been July. I think it was August. Maybe it was July. Anyway, that's how behind I am on editing. I have a bunch of like clips to pull but this whole live streaming thing is much easier for me to put out content, and I'm getting a lot more keen and a lot better at the flow of running it by myself and being able to share the clips without a hassle. So I'm pretty proud of that, and hopefully things seem to flowing a little bit better for people that are watching out there. So hey, thank you so much again. I hope that y'all have a great night and you take care of yourselves, and please hit me up, follow me, or don't even follow me, just at me on Twitter, and let's talk. Let me know what you're doing. I want to hear from you, and have a great night. I got mad love. Peace out, y'all.